Session 65. Session 65. Surah Fatiha, the Qur'an summarized. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. We continue with Surah Fatiha, the Quran summarized, and in that we are on verse 5, that is Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim, that is show us, give us the right path, or put us on the right path. The verse now is of Ashura, that is the consultation, and the verse is وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَهُمُ الْبَغْيُ هُمْ يَنْتَصِرُونَ. Translation: and those believers are such that when they are tormented, oppressed in any form, they retaliate and take revenge to defend themselves. Now the elaboration of this verse. They keep themselves prepared and not such that they ask the Lord to fight for them, not doing anything themselves. They forgive when they are wronged as individuals, or when forgiveness, disregarding and overlooking is preferable for the cause of Allah. They are aware that the disbelievers are their enemies forever. They therefore bring them into their security fold and disarm them to save themselves of their treachery and their ardent, that is the disbelievers' ardent desire to subjugate and persecute the believers. They, that is the believers, wage war, that is jihad, against the disbelievers. The believers are the vicegerents of Allah, the guardians, protectors of the subjugated, the persecuted, the harmed. The ones who enforce justice as directed by Allah, not of themselves, not their own parochial justice as the disbelievers do. They give peace, believers give peace to the mankind, saving it of the hands of the disbelievers. The unjust, the disbelievers, the unjust. They do not exploit the weak, the helpless, the less fortunate people and societies, and do not usurp the resources and genuine rights, ensure justice, and guarantee the rights of other people in the use and development of all resources in trade, commerce, and following strictly the principles laid down by Allah for His mankind. Allah's justice prevents mankind waging wars for the natural resources of the world. 42 Ashura verse 40. وَجَزَاءُ سَيِّئَةٍ سَيِّئَةٌ مِثْلُهَا فَمَنْ عَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Translation: and at all levels, individual and collective, public and private, requital, recompense for wrong as an injury for that wrong to the same extent, provided the act in itself is not a sin. At all, and I repeat, and at all levels, individual and collective, public and private, requital, that is recompense for a wrong, as is an injury for that wrong to the same extent, provided the act in itself is not a sin. But those who forgive, condone, and reconcile, restore harmony, to end the rift, their reward and remuneration is affixed with Allah. Surely Allah doesn't like the transgressors, oppressors, the unbelievers, the wrongdoers. Now, elaboration of this verse. When private and public matters, leadership in and of the society, and the macro level inter-regional and inter-society civilization affairs are controlled, managed, and dealt by the believers, then these are in safe hands to the advantage of the mankind. Their conduct has to align with the injunctions of Allah, therefore predictable, reliable, and beneficial for all. Broadly, about 7 qualities, attributes have been mentioned by Allah here in these verses of Ashura from 36 to verse 40, which differentiate the believers from the rest of the people, the unbelievers, the sinful. I repeat, about 7 broadly, about 7 qualities, attributes have been mentioned by Allah in these verses, which differentiate the believers from the rest of the people, unbelievers, the sinful. 1. They have faith and full trust in Allah that He is always kind to help them at all times, all occasions, and everywhere, and who is well aware of their compulsions, limitations, requirements, desires precisely. They do not get jittery, panicky, do not overreact, using hammer for the flies because of their own unwarranted fears and apprehensions, and do not eventually become unbearable, intolerable, and abnormal creatures, and do not become eventually unbearable, intolerable, and abnormal creatures. 2. That they desist from major sins, blatant permissiveness. They are modest. They do not have any major weaknesses or failing in their characters which could lead to their downfall and disgrace, thereby creating crises proportional to the scope and effects of their power. Obviously, they wouldn't tolerate grave sins and blatant shamelessness around, to the immense benefit of the society. 3. Man gets blind to reason in rage and temper, but they forgive people even at such times, mainly for the fear of Allah. Not only do they retain a sense of balance between the right and wrong, between what is their due and the excess, even in this state, they forgive their right. Even in this state, they forgive their right. It obviously implies that even when reason flies to brutish beasts, with other beings, they are prepared to listen because they fear Allah. They are prepared to listen because they fear Allah. Zafar, remember, don't count him a man, even if made of amber, who doesn't remember God in affluence, who doesn't fear God in anger. I repeat, Zafar, remember, don't count him a man, even if made of amber, who doesn't remember God in affluence, who doesn't fear God in anger. Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor. Now 4, They accept and obey Allah's instructions in a happy manner, there and then, without delay, and in the manner directed, even at times when these are inconvenient or difficult, because their aim of life is to seek the pleasure of Allah, because the aim of their life is to seek the pleasure of Allah. And the mode, the way of their life is the way of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the last and final. They do not mind the rough and the rigors, the buffets of fate. Their feet, their feet, their feet in blisters. If Allah is happy with them, their feet in blisters, they are satisfied if Allah is happy with them. 5. They decide important matters with consultation. Seek advice, even if it be from the walls. In the matters of the state, it is obligatory by Qur'an and Sunnah to seek advice. The head of the state, the Caliph, is to be selected with mutual consultation. Making the decisions of the ill-educated and the sinful binding in the selection of the leaders leads to the moral degeneration of the society. The moral values, standards are perpetually on the decline since decades, for the reason that religious values have been substituted, replaced with secular standards. I repeat, that the moral values, standards are perpetually on the decline since decades, for the reason that religious values have been substituted, replaced with secular standards because of the secular systems. Because of the secular systems, secular ideologies in vogue. So values no longer retain their permanence. So values no longer retain their permanence because of the absence of religions. This glaring degeneration in all societies and civilizations of the world doesn't require elaboration. The majorities in these systems vote people of their own caliber and standards into power. The secular systems, the direct antithesis of religions, cannot be used to support or sustain anything, any system based on the scriptures of Allah. These are mutually excluding eternally. These are mutually excluding eternally. 6. They spend in the way of Allah for the pleasure of Allah. They spend in the way of Allah for the pleasure of Allah. And 7. And when they are harmed, persecuted, they retaliate in equal limits when it is not appropriate to forgive in the interest of the believers and for the eventual benefit of the perpetrator himself and for the eventual benefit of the perpetrator himself. When the initiator of excess is contrite, repentant, and forgiveness will not be pernicious for the believers and will have reformatory effects for the future, it is better to forgive. In contraindications, punitive action is more appropriate. 42 Ashura verse 41. وَلَا مِنْ أَنْ تَسَرَ بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ السَّبِيلِ. Translation: and those who avenge when wronged are not to be blamed, held accountable. Surah 42, Surah 42, verse 42, verse 40, and verse 42 as well. إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس ويبغون في الأرض بغير الحق أولئك لهم عذاب أليم. Translation: only those people are blameworthy who oppress, commit atrocities on people, and terrorize them in the country for no fault. It is they for whom there is a grievous torture hereafter. It is they for whom there is a grievous torture hereafter. 42 Ashura verse 44. وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ وَلِيٍّ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ وَتَرَى الظَّالِمِينَ لَمَنْ رَأَوُا الْعَذَابَ يَقُولُونَ هَلْ إِلَى مَرْدٍ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. The believers attained the above referred distinctions for Allah assisted them to do so. They endeavored to move towards the Rabb. He does whatever He considers appropriate. Allah does whatever He considers appropriate. There can be no resistance whatsoever from anywhere in the worlds. There can be no resistance whatsoever from anywhere in the worlds. Whatever He does, Allah does. Whatever Allah doesn't permit can never occur. He guides unto Himself whomsoever He wishes. Now the precise translation of the verse. And he whom Allah lets go astray has no protector after him. And you will see the disbelievers, transgressors, the depraved, sinful, when they'll have the hell before them, lamenting, wishing if there was a way back to earth, where this time they would be the most faithful believers, where this time they would be the most faithful believers. Man's crucial folly lies in not comprehending, realizing, and doing things at the proper time. In this little lifespan, limited time at his disposal, his decisions become time critical. Life is almost a tight. A correct, timely decision leads to safety. Mankind has to realize, see, and face the truth of its Creator. The fateful question is when. The fateful question is when. His success, victory lies in seeing it in his life here, which has been given for this very purpose, after which it will be time barred. After which it will be time barred. When one has entered the playing field to join a match in progress, it is no use trying to change the rules of the game. I repeat, when one has entered the playing field to join a match in progress, it's no use trying to change the rules of the game. This is how it is, and this is how it will be. Since 14 centuries, no one has been able to prove that Qur'an is not the word of Allah, whereas the Judas and the Christians themselves have punchy reservations about their books. They themselves have punchy reservations about their books. 42 Surah Shura, verse 46. وَمَا كَانَ لَهُم مِّنْ أَوْلِيَاءَ يَنْصُرُونَهُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ يُضْلِلِ اللَّهُ فَمَا لَهُ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. Translation, and this is the last verse for today. And they have no well-wishers, no supporters to rescue them from hell, when Allah hasn't helped them. And he who is left alone by Allah has no quarter, cannot adopt Allah's straight path in the world, nor save himself from the fire of hell hereafter. That's the end for today. Please pray for me, ex-Brigadier Mustansir Billah.